All right, we're live. Yay. Okay. And I don't even have my name tag on, but I will get that on. So, hi everybody. Welcome to Dive into World Building. It took us a little while to get this started because we were having technical difficulties, and as it turns out, they're changing the whole Hangout service. So, you know, life is full. But today we're talking about body modification, and it should be very interesting because we're going to try to take it from a little bit of a different perspective. Um, and yay! So I'm excited. So body modification. We've talked about body modification in some ways before, and what I was thinking about it. What struck me the other day when I was thinking about this topic was that body modification, that phrase is associated with a particular type of activity in our current times, right?
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily that narrowly applicable, right? So if you read about body modification as a topic in our current times, what you'll tend to see is things like, well, there are these people who want to alter themselves because they don't want to look human anymore, or there are people who gather in groups in Japan to inject themselves with saline solution to give themselves lumps and various kinds of things because they want to look X, Y, or Z, and then of course, because it's saline solution, it all goes away within about 24 hours. But it's this you've got these very different kinds of things. So there are ways in which body modification is an activity that is sort of a niche social activity that people do, that they want to dissociate themselves from humanity in some sense. I mean, you've got the one guy who's tattooed himself and given himself a crest so that he looks like he's a reptile, and sharpened his teeth and various things like that, because he literally does not want to look like a human being, because apparently he doesn't feel like a human being. So he wants his appearance to match how he feels inside, which is fascinating in and of itself. But I think that in fact we're dealing with a lot more, and what brought it home to me was and my son came home yesterday saying that his history class had been very sad. And I said, wow, what was so sad about your history class? Because they learn about battles and people dying and whatever all the time. And he says, I just learned about foot binding in China.
Mm.
And I was like, wow. And it suddenly struck me, that is a very, very dramatic form of body modification.
Yeah.
And it's not even necessarily voluntary, right?
Yeah.
But it's one of these things that was done in order to, there's a whole class. Okay, so there's a whole class of things that people do in order to mark themselves as well off, right? I'm a member of the aristocracy, therefore I will wear huge baskets under my skirts and not be able to go through doors straight, and not be able to share a bench with anybody because my dress is just so huge, right?
Yeah.
And so people will inconvenience themselves to a great degree to show off their wealth and their social status. But with foot binding, it really takes it into the body modification territory, where people are enduring a lot of pain, a lot of disability, effectively, in order to mark themselves as a member of this particular class. So I don't know. I mean, I think once you think about it from that point of view, there's a lot of body modification that goes on that I've never spoken about before in this type of a hangout. Hi, Cliff. Welcome.
Hi.
Yay, Cliff made it.
I had technical difficulties. I experienced them.
Yes, we did. But anyway, so.
And Morgan.
So we're talking about body modification, but I was just talking about how, in addition to the modern sense of, modern sense of body modification, that there's also things like foot binding.
Oh, wow, yeah, right.
That is a pretty dramatic form of body modification. And it's great to see you guys. I didn't think Morgan was going to make it, and I haven't seen Cliff in an age.
I didn't think so either.
But anyway.
My first thought was male circumcision is also a pretty ancient form of body modification.
That's true. That's true. Thank you for bringing it up.
Female genital
mutilation, yep.
Unfortunately, also, I don't think it's old, though. I don't think nearly as old, but pretty old.
It's hard to say. Yeah, I don't know how old that practice is, but it's definitely not modern.
No, male body modification is at least 3,000 or 4,000 years old.
Yeah.
And then there's the eunuch modifications, various eunuch
modification. Yeah.
Forbidden City in China. Hold on, I got to do some parenting. I'll be right back.
Sure.
And I can't place exactly what group it is. I believe it's some South American tribe, perhaps, or historically, that strap babies' heads to a wooden board.
Oh, that was the Maya.
Go.
The Maya aristocracy would shape their heads, and they would also inlay their teeth with jade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Speaking of the eunuch modification, there's also the castrato.
Yes.
Right, which is similar but has a very different purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's interesting because people have been doing this for a very long time. I mean, you think about, so like for example, the tattoos.
Scarification.
Scarification and tattoos, yeah. Which, I mean, who knows how long those have been going on? For just ages. I mean, you've got the Pacific Islander has a history of tattooing, and there's also like the Maori people of New Zealand have very specific tattoo styles.
Europe, I guess, had it before the Christians came. They found, like people frozen in glaciers. Up in like Switzerland, where they've had tattoos and stuff. But it went out of fashion in Europe until sailors started going around the world and getting tattoos, and then coming back with tattoos, and then rich people started like going abroad and getting tattoos and coming back with tattoos.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of ended up like for a long time this real low class thing.
Well, it's funny, because the meaning of these different forms of body modification is not at all fixed, right?
Yeah.
It's they generally have social meaning, right? Either they mark you as a member of a particular religion or other social group, right? So group membership is pretty critical.
Coming of age rituals.
Right. Within the group, they will mark changes of status. And I think, that change of status idea is really important because, in fact, a lot of times what you'll see is that people will get tattoos or whatever it is in order to mark some kind of change in their lives. So even when there isn't a huge, like, now you are an adult and this is our official ceremony or whatever, even in our sort of what we would term our relatively casual society, here we are, and all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to make a big life change. I'm going to change my hair. I'm going to change I'm going to get myself a tattoo, whatever it happens to be. So, yeah, I mean, I think that change of change of life status thing is a pretty fundamental meaning of some of these things. And I don't really consider haircuts to be body modification because they're so temporary, right?
Yeah, that grows
but at the same time, maintaining a particular hairstyle could be a form of, your representation of your body or whatever. It's just a little bit less dramatic than the other things we're talking about.
Well,
They're kind of like henna tattoos. They're not permanent.
Right.
Like henna tattoos can be used to mark something, but it's a temporary modification. Like brides in India, for instance, get particular patterns.
Yeah.
Which is significant, but liminal, right? It's like during a certain period where you're outside your normal life, the marriage and the aftermath of wedding. And then there's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where we meet Zaphod Beeblebrox for the first time, and his body modification was he added a third arm. And Ford's response is, "Hey, the extra arm suits you," and that's... Yeah.
Right, and did he always have two heads, or was that another modification?
He always had, well, it depends. There's like all the versions of The Hitchhiker's Guide contradict, and Arthur says, well, he met him at a party, and he only had the one head, and he called himself Phil. But if you play the video game version, you meet him at the party, and he's got a bird cage covering his second head. And he's just calling himself Phil and saying that he's got this bird.
Yeah, so I'm seeing that in the chat bar that Morgan has mentioned neck lengthening, and in fact, back when we were talking about foot binding, that occurred to me, and I didn't get it out of my mouth.
Oh my God, I love that! It's so pretty.
So thank you, Morgan, for picking up where I failed to pick up, because I think that's also something that's it's very dramatic body modification, and in fact, once the rings are there, the vertebrae get stretched out, so much that
it's actually
have to
not
keep
the
them
vertebrae.
because otherwise your neck would just flop.
I've seen that. They can take them off. They can take them off, and their head does not snap off.
Well, it doesn't snap off. I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, it lowers the clavicles. It actually lowers the clavicles, making the neck look longer, and so you get the slope. And they do take the rings off, and it's actually not rings. It's not multiple rings. It's a brass spiral.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That can you can unwind it and then you can put it back. But yeah, I mean, like for regular stuff, like you kind of have to drink through a straw. I think that's easier. And some other stuff, but it's not as detrimental as foot binding. It doesn't impair mobility or their work or what they do.
Okay.
Right. Well, that was part of the point of foot binding, right? Like, was that make it so that you need cervix, right? So it's a status thing.
Right. I mean,
the fingernails too, right? The men would grow their fingernails really long.
Oh yeah.
So they couldn't do manual labor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, of course, is not nearly as detrimental.
No.
But it's trim the nails, you change their status significantly.
Yeah.
So you got to go out in the fields and work.
Yeah.
Or take the trash out or whatever it is that you can't do with those nails. But I've seen some people do remarkable things these days with really long nails. They just
God, the fucking acrylics.
Oh, I've got a friend who has long nails, and he like types on his phone with nails and things like that. Anyway.
Yeah.
He used to use it as a stylus with his Newton.
I think this is one really important thing that people have done with forms of body modification is to mark themselves in some kind of practical way as outside the working class, right?
Yes, exactly.
Well, like today, I just can't. If you have tattoos on your face, you cannot get a job.
Oh, you could get a job in my company.
Okay.
But that's Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen things where like tattoo artists are like, no, I will not tattoo your face because you'll never get a job after this. And they're like,
Sure.
are you really, really, really sure?
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
because
So like, my wife is a medical doctor, and she has a belly ring, which is fairly common. And ever since a particular, I think Aerosmith video has cut across class lines because that was a very popular MTV video, where it showed a young woman getting that. And so, but she got pushback as a resident from patients who could see the outline of it through her shirt. And so she didn't get any more piercings after that, and she specifically didn't get facial piercings because she had to deal with patients as an authority figure, as a medical doctor. And it didn't fit their preconceived notion of what a medical doctor should look like, and so she just didn't do it specifically for that reason.
Well, and I think you're putting me on to some other things, like, so, membership in the class of beautiful women. People do a lot of body modification for that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Implants and Botox and all of those kinds.
And even extreme dieting, right? Like
extreme dieting. Yeah.
To be Luke and Leia, Mark Hamill had to lose 50 pounds, and Carrie Fisher had to lose like 35 to play a role in Hollywood. And people have had to gain weight to do it too. Like I remember there was some movie where Dan Aykroyd had to gain weight. Was Sean Astin, who played Samwise in Lord of the Rings, had to gain 20 pounds for the role. Things like that.
Yeah.
And it's like a 3-year.
That's a lot rarer.
Yeah.
Usually they want you to lose weight. Like women have to be super thin and super young.
Yeah.
So
or they're unhireable.
A lot of these are, I guess most of the ones we've been talking about were permanent. Weight changes aren't necessarily, except that there can be permanent, not necessarily visible changes to your health with those changes. So, what are you willing to do to your body
for a job?
For a job.
And that's what actors
to not do.
And that's another, that's a whole realm, right? There's like unintended body modification, like, coal miners get stuff in their lungs, right? That is a permanent, debilitating, eventually, body modification.
That's almost more a disease, though.
There's a song actually about a working class, the Scottish singer Ed Miller, who lives in Texas, which is a whole other story, but he does a folk song. I don't think he wrote it. I think it was another singer who wrote it, but Crooked Jack, about a guy who did manual labor and was a really strong, and I was strong until, as he sings in the song, they broke me across the back. And now he's an old man and he's not good for manual labor anymore, and so he's known as Crooked Jack. And, that sort of thing, that kind of works somebody until they break in some fashion is I think deserves to be in body modification discussion as a very important class issue.
Yeah. And the people who have to work out in the sun.
Yeah.
And so that changes them as well. It's an interesting question.
I'll be right back checking on the kids.
Well, and a minute ago when we were talking about beauty, the whole dental arena.
Oh my gosh, that's right, braces.
Tooth straightening, caps, bleaching.
Yep. You a good point. Yeah. And it's funny because I'm really glad of where all the various different places we're going with this discussion, because I think that when you're thinking about creating a world inside a story, there are so many places that you can go, right? And a lot of times we don't think about all the possibilities. You know, maybe we think of a couple of things.
Yeah.
But it's helpful, I think, to have these discussions publicly available so people can be like, oh, okay, so if I wanted to do this, what would be some other things that would be kind of like that we can do, right? But so anyway, I mean, I'm really glad that we're covering so many different kinds of things. The other one that occurs to me is like medical modifications to keep you alive, like pacemaker. You know, I was thinking of Neil Clark and his cyborg anthology that he put together after he had a pacemaker installed.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, a lot of people spend a lot of time pondering the future of body modifications and how are we just going to get cybernetic implants because they look cool, or do you get them because you need them?
Yeah, but I mean, like, people already have artificial hips.
Yeah.
And knees and...
Yeah, but I mean, that's literally just metal in the shape of a hip that they stick in your butt, you know, I mean, it's not cybernetic, it's not electronic, it's just moving parts, it's just
oh, absolutely.
Mechanical.
I mean, it is definitely body modification.
Yeah.
And my knee is not going to hurt anymore because I have an artificial knee. You know?
It changes your functionality, your ability to do a job or, you know, a sport. You know, just because at some point, you know, pain, even if the one you've got functions, pain is debilitating.
Yeah.
I was thinking cybernetic. My husband's had cataract surgery, and now his eyes glow in the dark.
Ah, creepy!
It is kind of creepy.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, that's
It's
like that was that Vin Diesel movie?
Yeah,
Ribbit?
the shine job in Pitch Black.
Yes,
Yeah.
Pitch Black. Yeah. Oh my God, that was my whole pencil just fell apart.
Oh.
Oh my God, I'll have to get that later. Poop.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So
That's okay.
I don't know if anyone has ever read or seen an interview with Professor Kevin Warwick of the University of Reading. He wrote a book called I, Cyborg, and he volunteered for various experiments in the 90s, starting in the 90s. And one of the things was he had a little device placed in him that when he went to the computer science department at the university, it would recognize him and turn on the lights and things like that. So this was an early tracker, but the main one that he had was he had a 100 by 100 set of electrodes put in here with his nerve so that he could directly connect to a computer. And later his wife had the procedure. It was a temporary procedure, basically a proof of concept. Hi, honey. Yeah, that's Miranda, everybody. Say hi, Miranda.
Miranda.
Her body modification is wings. So, yep. Anyway, so he had connected to a computer and was able to move a hand in a lab in the United States from England using thought. And also he connected his nervous system temporarily to his wife through the computer, and they could send neural signals so they could feel a little bit about what each other was feeling. Anyway, a lot of this is in his book, I, Cyborg, but he's also interviewed all over YouTube and whatnot. He's fascinating.
Thank you for mentioning that, because one of the things that we haven't gotten to yet is prosthetics.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people are now being able to control prosthetics with their thoughts, which is pretty darn cool.
Yeah, yeah. There's been that's at the experiment stage, but there's some very interesting videos. There's also a YouTube video of a field test of an exoskeleton in Japan that has several of the researchers going upstairs and things like that for paraplegics and quadriplegics eventually to have that,
Right.
which is not a body modification, except that it's kind of a frame to put the body in, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, I guess it falls into the same category as a wheelchair for body modification. Is that a body modification if it's not permanently attached to you? Like that?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting question because does it count if it's simply part of your identity?
Yeah.
Because
There's nothing simple about having it part of your identity either, right? I mean, it's certainly, you know, and then that brings up the question of cochlear implants in the deaf community.
Yep.
Which is a whole big mess of a thing, right?
Yep.
And some people are dead set against it, and some people are for it, and the whole history of basically ostracizing deafness and teaching them lip reading and trying to force them into mainstream society plays into the current situation.
Yep.
And the technology comes along and it broadsides the deaf community and divides it. And as time goes on, presumably more hearing technologies will be available. My dad has a couple of his bones in one ear are artificial,
wow.
plastic,
yeah.
from a long time ago. And they lasted a while, and now they pretty much don't work. So he's got a good ear and a bad ear, but, you know, they helped for a couple of decades.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Mm.
Well, and talking future trends, genetic modification.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that would, it's basically involuntary because we'd be doing it to our children, not to ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, that's
well, I mean, we've already covered a number of involuntary body modifications.
Yeah.
Well, you know, like circumcision and castration and things like that.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. And like genital mutilation and finding and all of those things, right?
Yeah.
Which
some of them could be voluntary, like circumcision, depending on how old you are.
Yeah, exactly. But anything that starts before a certain age, you kind of have to say, well,
yeah.
So then the parents or guardians have to make a decision, right? There's a book that I've never read called Geek Love about circus freaks who the pregnant woman deliberately takes drugs so that the children come out with extreme body distortions on purpose. And so the whole idea of that squicks me so much that I've never read the book, but I know that's what the book is about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so each one of their kids has various, you know, like no legs or whatever, you know, because of that prenatal conditions that were deliberately induced by the fictional parents.
Yeah.
All right. And of course, I gave my daughter wings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
My other daughter, who's outside playing a truck,
also. Think of the genetic modification was the wings.
Yes, they're detachable wings. They're special.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I have seen
I
have seen a number of stories where certain types of body mods, like, oh, you know, now all the kids have wings or scales or whatever it is. It's like sort of a fashion thing where, you know, particular types of modifications are considered normal in the story, right? Yeah, I can't remember the name of the story, but there was, you know, it was like she was the main character was the teacher at an elementary school, and in the elementary school there were all these kids who had wings or fur or whatever it was.
Cool.
Well, you know, I thought it was interesting, but at the same time, I think that there's I think there's a deeper layer of it that doesn't get touched when we treat it casually, and so I don't know. I find it interesting. Yes, you know, you can treat this stuff casually.
Well,
but
there's a lot
of what we've talked about today is really very not casual, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I, you know, and I think back at the story and I go, wow, you know, that was a cool story, and supposedly this was very, very normal, but at the same time, what are you doing to those kids, right? It's probably a class status modification.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think it depends. Like, yeah, if it's temporary, if it is like modifications like clothing that you can just change.
Mm-hmm.
Like today, I want photophores, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and so you like go to your machine and dial it up, and like, you know, you glow like a squid, you know, for the day.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, I want this, but yeah, but it's like it's sort of the question of like sort of after, like it's like, is it changeable? Is it permanent? Is it something you've done as an adult? Is it something your parents did to you? There was Neil Asher has like in the GridLink, I forgot what his universe is called.
A polity.
Yeah, the polity. People do stuff like, you know, whatever, and it's a thing, you know. Like there was one guy who was had double muscles, which he had like double, like all his muscles were doubled. And not doubled in size. He had two of everything. And I've actually, weirdly enough, I saw that. I saw a bull, like a photograph of a bull that was double muscled in like a science magazine. So I'm like, okay, that's plausible. You know, so it's like, I think those are the questions that you want to address. Like, are the little kids, are they permanently scaly? And is it like their parents did it to them? Or did the kid wake up and say, I want to be a crocodile today, mommy?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay.
Also,
you know,
the culture books, people change gender.
Yes, that was what I was going to say.
It's normal in their society for every individual to father a child and to give birth to a child at some point during their life.
Which book is this?
Ian Banks' culture books. This is
that's not mandatory.
In player of games or consider Phlebas or use of weapons, one of those mentions that detail. But that's extreme body modification. The other thing that that the whole I want to be a squid for the day made me think about is that we do extreme body modification of animals.
Yes.
Like turkeys, for example, domestic turkeys, or to domesticate various animals, we have completely changed them or invented new species.
I mean, look at dogs.
Yeah.
Yes, dogs, right, exactly. A Chihuahua, you know, was supposed to be a wolf, but no. That's right.
Yeah, put a Chihuahua next to a Great Dane and tell me they're the same species.
Yeah.
Well, they are. They are the same species.
I know.
They can interbreed.
But I mean, I've also seen Marianne
mechanically.
No, sorry, it wasn't Marianne Mohanraj. Sorry, it was. She's done a lot of interesting things, so go read her story. But
yeah, so as Anne Harris in Accidental
Creatures, by Kay and Bowes.
Yeah, what?
Kay and Bowes wrote a story where kids were changing their genders back and forth.
Kay and Bowes.
I remember many years ago, many years ago, reading a story in one of like Don Wollheim's annual Best SF from like the 1970s or the 1980s, early 80s, in which it was the point of view of two children and their teachers, and all of them appeared as four children. And basically, it was like your school is the world, and the four of you are a play group, and you hang out together. And everyone knows that two of the people hanging out are adult teachers who have been shrunk back into child bodies, and two of them are real children.
Wow.
And it follows their adventures through the city, full of actual adults. And at the end of the story, the kids graduate to the next level, which means they get teachers who don't take child bodies. And those teachers go and get young again for the next pair of children. And then they go to the older children's class where the teachers are in adult bodies.
Wow.
And I don't remember the name of the author or the story, only that it was in one of those best of, Don Wollheim best of science fiction annuals.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 30 years ago I read this. And it stuck with me because it was such a bizarre and interesting concept.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and also we've also seen some things where people are modified to survive in extreme environments, like to breathe underwater, or to breathe nitrogen or, or whatever it is.
Clifford Simak's city, people convert to Jovian life forms. Like there's like these creatures that are native to Jupiter, and they just switch their bodies to that. Yeah, Fred Paul.
Lois McMaster Bujold has the quaddies that were adapted to free fall.
Yeah.
Where they had a second set of arms in place of their legs.
Sure. Yeah.
So creepy.
And Walter John Williams in oh God, what was it? The Angel Station. There are a lot of there's one woman with 4 arms because she does a lot of stuff in spaceships in 0G, and that's very helpful. And her brother doesn't have that mod, but she has that mod. And of course, in Neuromancer, there's all sorts of cybernetics.
Right.
Very first scene.
Science fiction examples.
There's
which is interesting.
The very first scene. There's a bartender with a plastic robotic arm, right? And then of course there's Molly, right, with her razors that come out of her fingernails, and her mirror shades permanently grafted to her head, and her ear ducts rerouted to spitting so that when she's upset, she just spits instead of cries.
And this is way back 30 or 40 years ago. I vaguely think it was a series of stories rather than a novel, but it postulated a universe or a future in which to settle various human colonies on other planets. The people were modified to fit the environment of the planet.
Sure.
So you had this huge multi-planet society but each planet's people were completely different.
It makes me think there was also a really interesting universe concept in C.S. Friedman's This Alien Shore.
Yeah, it was accidental modification.
Where it was actually the faster-than-light star drive caused all these various types of unpredicted body modification and genetic modification in people. So in fact, that in this universe there are no aliens. There are only humans, but they are all alien to one another because they've traveled in this first, like people had the first star drive and they were really excited, so they went all over the place, and they didn't realize that by doing this they were completely altering themselves so that they weren't, strictly speaking, human anymore.
Yeah.
And now it's changed so that you can travel without altering yourself, but you have all of these different types of humans who have all of these different types of body features in various parts of the galaxy.
Yep.
You know what is interesting is these are all science fiction examples of like extreme modification, but like you don't necessarily see it in fantasy as much.
True.
Which I think is a detriment, because I have been for like the longest time wanting to combine like the use of magic with body modifications and like the mobility aids and cochlear implants. And I mean, I've spent a long time pondering this, but I've never quite managed to get it onto paper in a way I feel is satisfactory. I think sort of the closest would be like China Mieville, the Boss Leg, where there's tons of modifications, and it's some of it's punitive. The process isn't necessarily explained, but all of a sudden, you've got somebody was like there was one woman who like her sentence was had like the arms of the baby she killed grafted onto her head. So they would use it as these sort of punitive things, but it was a combination of like magic, technology, science,
You've got to take your fairy wings.
So, yeah. So it was a combination. And DM Cornish has like a sort of upper middle grade YA series called The Monster Blood Tattoo.
Fairy skirt comes off.
And there's these people in there who fight monsters, and they have monster organs grafted into their body, into their bodies that allow them to fight monsters.
Wow.
One of the characters, Europa, she's a Fulgur, and she can kind of generate lightning with this organ that she has. That is a foreign organ.
Let me help. Let me help.
It occurs to me that some of the early culture's beliefs in, say, are like eating the heart of a lion will give you the strength of a lion.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's, I mean, we would say today that doesn't work, but that was an attempt at body modification.
Mm. Well, people are, yeah. I mean, if you get into magic potions that give you strength and whatever,
yeah,
I'm not sure how much that counts as body modification, because it is in the strictly semantic sense, but at the same time we've kind of been talking about things that alter what your body shape or function or
potions, I mean steroids.
Yeah.
As potions. Because the steroids actually modify the shape of your body in order to produce that function.
Yeah.
So, if the potions just say you're magically stronger without changing the shape.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between a potion and a fantasy and steroids in a science fiction or the real world?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
That's pretty fascinating, though. I think you're right about steroids counting as a body modification over time.
Yeah, I thought of that earlier and didn't get to mention it for some reason.
Yeah, you were catching all the things.
Yeah, that's almost like the medical, because it falls under medical science discovered hormones.
Yeah.
Well,
and you know what? This is something else. I had a kid in my high school who was tiny, and she was undergoing treatment to make her taller.
Yeah.
Human growth hormone.
Yeah, I think she was having hormonal treatment, but she was also having some form of like physical.
They do the surgical where they cut the bones and they put the lengtheners in and they give you like 2 extra inches and then the bone grows back.
Yeah, I've read about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like
Taking
incredibly painful, but it can help like people with some types of dwarfism get that, so they can kind of be closer to average size.
Yeah, but oh my gosh.
It is apparently incredibly painful, and it's a long process, and it's a long, painful process. And when you get it like in your legs, you can't walk for months.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, for some people that might actually be functional, not just.
It is. Yeah, it is.
It is.
It's people who are like, I can reach the light switch now.
Yeah. Wow. You're going to have to unmute yourself, Cliff. Because I muted you because there was a little conversation going on over there, and I wanted to hear what Che was saying. There you go.
Yeah.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't really know the technology well enough to do that. Unmute myself. I saw you went to fantasy.
Well, we did talk about, whether body modification happened a lot in fantasy if there were magical body modifications.
Well, there's the Golem is heavily modified by the One Ring, as are the Nazgul.
Well, okay.
By the Nine Ring. Yeah, so that's probably the biggest example in fantasy of body modification from magic that I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in fairy tales, of course, people are constantly getting changed into completely different things.
Bears and frogs.
I was just reading to the twins the story of the 6 brothers who are turned into swans, and then she has to be silent for 6 years and knit new shirts but doesn't finish, and one kid still has a swan wing for an arm at the end of it all.
Yeah.
Obviously that's heavy body. In Cinderella, the original, the sisters one saws off her heel and the other saws off her toes in order to try and fit the glass slipper, but it's the blood that gives it away. The prince wouldn't have noticed this other than the fact that they happen to be bleeding.
This is not a guy I'd want to marry.
No, he's probably quite nearsighted, actually, if you read the text.
Yeah, maybe
Well,
it's
then all he needs is a prosthetic.
Hello. Who are you again?
It's like Mr. Magoo is the prince, right?
But it's a simple prosthetic to fix that. So
yes. Yeah, right.
Much easier than... Yeah, I'm not wearing mine because otherwise I wouldn't be able to see you at this distance.
Yeah, these are my reading glasses because I have presbyopia.
Get a call from my kid's school.
Yeah.
But I will say thank you. We're about to go on to a break, and then I will resume in the new year, and I'll be in touch. We may have to switch over to the Google Hangouts service.
Okay.
Anyway, love you guys. Thank you, and I'm out of here.
Have a good time over your holiday.
Thank you. Hello? Hello? Oh, crap.